Alright, welcome to another long, boring edition of Haiku, porting Unix applications. My name is James Leone, it's not Martin Brown, but because Martin Brown was kind enough to donate his, or to release his book, just wanted to honor him by showing you the cover of it. I don't know if I've really honored him with my performance in porting applications, but I've tried. So I've covered a number of topics, and I am just about at a stopping point, and for numerous reasons that I'm going to go over, I hope. But I'm going to try to do one thing at a time. So most of the subject I'm going to try to cover right now are just the basic percentages of how things are going. I'm using Pkgsrc, and the only reason why I'm doing that is because it downloads the source code. It automates an attempt to compile, and there are 11,000 plus packages available, somewhere around 11,500. So for one, and if it works right, it'll just keep going in an automated fashion. There's a number of ways to compile whole groups of apps in an you can go into the archivers category, for example, and just type make in there, and it'll try to compile all the applications that are in the archivers category. The categories are a little bit different than Haiku Porter. I've used this to try to find new things that are out there and find out what the general state of porting Unix applications is and things of that nature. Now, what's my experience? Well, prior to 2 months ago, I've used Pkgsrc before, not a lot. I've compiled apps, but not a lot. I've never written any C code in my life. I've done some shell scripting. I've never, prior to the last month, have never edited a makefile, C code, or a config script, or just on the rarest of occasions, under explicit instruction from somebody else, if I ever did. So I'm not going to claim to have expertise in C, anything. What I'm doing is I'm just saying, okay, if I try to download all the source code in the world and plunk it on my computer and run make install clean, how well is it going to do? And how well will I be able to do with the limited experience that I have in getting these things to compile? And I use this environment that's most familiar to me. I'm not slamming Haiku Porter. Haiku Porter is a good tool, and it's going to turn out to be a very, very nice tool. I could tell. There's just a number of stoppages in Haiku Porter that makes it not all that smooth. Okay, but it has helped me, and I have used it. And I might do another video on how I got libxcb to actually where it was hard to get it working in Pkgsrc. Right now I'm at pretty much a stopping point where it's just going to take way too long. It's taken the better part of a day just to get libxcb compiled as a package, and it took a lot of just weird stuff that I did. And it's getting to be more like that because certain base packages seem broken to some extent. And so some of the breakage has to do with Pkgsrc, but some of the breakage has to do with the system, I believe. And again, we have a very wide scope of packages, but I'm also doing this because if we find things, we may find out things that could be or need to be changed within Haiku to allow us to have the full, experience of what BEOS promised us at the time. At the time BEOS went out of business, they were able to pretty much, not everybody, but certain people that have porting skills were able to actually get a current version of Firefox compiled, the whole suite. Now there's a lot of apps that are over at haikuports.org, and the group over there, not Haiku ports, Haiku files. Let me look. Get my screen out of the way here. because I don't want to Haiku-ware. God, I think it's Haiku-ware. The group that is over there has ported a lot of apps. They have DOS-EMU, they have Vice. I haven't even gotten that far. It just seems like I'm just constantly running into roadblocks. It also seems like recently there was a fundamental design change to the system for reasons that are completely unclear to me. But it pretty much almost turned all the work these people had done in creating a very large suite of very nice packages for Haiku. It just pretty much turned it to dust. I'm not sure why we would need to have changed the common directory now to something else, but it's gone. There are other things too, but that is probably it's very, very time consuming and very, very hard to build up a base of dependencies, and even port over apps like Vice, or it takes some technical knowledge. Sometimes you only have to change one file, but sometimes you have to really jump through hoops and walk tightropes to get a dependency of a lot of these programs to work. And then once and I could tell I downloaded a very large collection of libraries today that was over here at Haiku-ware, and I really would donate. I mean, they're looking for what, about $1,000. I would donate to this group, because this group really, the people that are here are really, I could tell, really concerned about getting apps that people want to use for Haiku, and they've gotten much farther than I have. So I guess this is pretty much an exploration of the state of Haiku as it is today and where everything is. But I'll start out with some basic overall stats, and I'm going to get into more details in the archivers category. And I'll say, when I show you this chart here that I have, I haven't attempted to compile all 11,797 applications. There are certain categories with higher percentage marks, and those are the ones I've probably made a dry run through at least. And on the archivers, I've actually looked at some of the packages very closely and made a very focused effort on getting a few of the applications to compile by making some changes. I made videos about those things. With the exception of what I've been doing the past week, there's nothing that I've done that I haven't put on camera. I may have breezed through it pretty quickly, but that's the situation. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Let's see if I'm getting this. Right, okay, so the archivers category is probably representative, to my mind, of mostly programs that are not X11 programs, and also as a result of putting a pretty strong effort into getting a good amount, 3 or 5, maybe 10 of the packages compiled, and some of the dependencies that they relied on. So what this is saying, what I'm saying here is that there are 104 available archiver packages. I've been able to create Pkgsrc packages out of 57 of them. So the remaining 47 packages I have yet been able to get to work in Pkgsrc, or to have a compiled binary that fits within the Pkgsrc structure. Some of the categories are I haven't even tried, like input method has a 0. Some that only have a few, I only tried mutt, and a few dependencies came up that happened to compile to be underneath there. Some I've made a pass-through that came out with very low numbers, 8% there for ham. The shells category, I stopped when I found out trying to compile the very first shell program in there would crash my system. The package tools I might take out of the overall category, and the emulators are going to be a little bit overstated because there's some packages that are there that are only for SUSE Linux, but overall you get an idea. The converters I've probably made a run through. The fonts I've made a run through. I paid a little bit of attention to games. I've made a run through of geography, and graphics I don't think I've made a run through. Okay, and the development just comes up as a matter of being a dependency. And I probably place the most effort of porting on the development packages. Now when it comes to details about the archivers, this is a bit messy here, but basically I've taken some very condensed notes here because given that there are 11,797 packages I'm trying to account for right now, these other papers are just package lists broken down by category. This happens to be the archivers category. It's 3 pages long. Each page roughly has 66 packages on it, except the first page and anyone that happens to spill over, like this on the left-hand side. But I have them numbered. So there's 63 packages on this first page. Okay. For some of the packages, I'm noticing that, in fact, I should probably just go down the list of things that happen. Some of the packages won't really compile and package source without some intervention. In some cases, I had to actually go in and do a native configure. And let's just go over some of the definitions now because I'm gonna, for the sake of brevity and having to explain things. The way package source works is it's a set of shell scripts and make files, but these make files are basically instructions for downloading, compiling, making, and installing source code from the internet. So within the source code that gets downloaded, of course, there'll be some configure scripts, and those configure scripts will create their own make file. So when I say outside make file, I'm talking about the package source make file. When I talk about inside make file, I'm talking about the make file that was either supplied with the source code or created by the configure scripts after the compile process started. The package source works is that, as I already alluded to, I guess, it downloads the source code, extracts it, changes directories for you into that directory, attempts to run a configure after applying any patches to the configure scripts, and then creates a make file. Then the make file tries to make a binary, and then if it succeeds, it'll create a package, put it into .packages directory. It will also install within the package source structure the package it created, and then you're done. Now, if there's any dependencies that come up during this process, it'll try to do the same thing for the dependency first. It'll automatically just go change directories into that package's area and start the process there. So you can get a very large chain of things going, like say try to compile Firefox, it's going to work its way all the way down. You really don't have to do anything if everything's working right. And that did happen for me in NetBSD. Both with Firefox and with KD3, not a problem at all with the same version of package source that I have. The only stop I had was I had to, that I could have avoided if I had said skip license checks equals yes in my make.conf file, it would have gone through the whole thing. So the question is, what's the difference between the results that I'm getting from NetBSD and the results I'm getting here? When you're saying, well, it's a different operating system, you have to port it, blah, blah, blah. That's true, but the point I think I'm going to end up making when I look over these stats is that there's something going on with the headers or the operating system's ability to read them. And I'll get into more details, but now I'm just going to look over what this summary is. I had a printout of maybe 50 pages of error messages that I basically summarized here. Up at the top, there are two. There are two packages at least. Let's see what 9 means there. Okay, if it says 9, that means that when the package tries to compile, there's an error referencing the header file that's supplied with Haiku, and it'll say there's some kind of undefined function or call or something like that. So that happened with Archangel. That depends on the zlib header, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the zlib header because I found it very interesting. CPIO had an issue with the header, at least the way the source code reads it. HPAC. Okay, so those are ones that are definitely identified as problems with headers. There were also, let's see, what was number 2 there? Okay, so I don't know how many you can count here, but let's see. I think there's another category. I know I have it. There has a dependency on. So the ones that are marked with 3 are non-existent system headers. And we've got 1, 2 of those, 3 at 4 of those. So Haiku literally does not have the header that would allow those things to compile. The ones that are marked 9, so we have, let's see, what is this? So headers 1, 2, 3, 4, and then for 9 there, there's 1. So that's 5 so far. Let's see. All right, so out of the 47, there were 5 that I could say are definitely either 5 or 6 that are header files that are actually missing. What's this number 17? I think that's also a header issue too. Okay, and then for 17, that's right. The program requires a dependency, but the dependency can't find the header. So let's see, we got 5, 6, 7. Seven out of 47. So there's about 40 left. Then there's a number of them that rely on Python. That would be okay, 3 of those. Some of them rely on Ruby. This zoo file presupposes that the headers are going to be located in user include. And then there's some ones that are not really clear. Some of them, there's about 4 or 5 that rely on Ruby, 3 that rely on, PHP. I'm not going to try to do an exact accounting here, but we got undefined references, missing headers, problems with headers, and then when I look at the details of, say, Python or the other dependencies that it relies on, it seems like there's always these undefined references that seem to be coming up, and they're not happening in the other operating systems. So I'm wondering why that's the case. I had one example, and I'll look at the zlib header right now, because one of my errors was related to the zlib header. If I can find it. I'm also going to talk about the B includes. I'm going to talk about what the results are for Python, because it literally cannot, we're going to dig into these details. Okay, so first set of details. We're getting about, without any intervention, anywhere from 10 to 30% of a success rate when there's an automated process just to download source code, attempt to compile, and see what happens. With some intervention, the dependencies tend to compound a little bit, so we're up to maybe 50% if it's something that's just straightforward and slam dunk that really isn't a package that needs to be compiled, like fonts. I'm up to 70% on that. I'm going to throw that out because that really doesn't, a lot of the font packages really don't need to be compiled. So, and I'm a little bit I am a little bit on the low end for the ones I haven't worked my whole way through. Overall, I've got 8%. But to be fair, I would say if I gave everything a try, just let it sit and just let it do its thing in an automated fashion, I think it would probably come out to be 15, 20%, maybe 30%, somewhere in that range. Probably not as high as 50%. It would take a little more of a concerted effort to do that. And it really all depends on how many packages rely on Python, and I'll explain why that's very important in this situation. Okay, so let's take a look at the zlib header. And this was the first thing that gave me a kind of clue as to what might be going on. I'm not an expert at headers by any stretch of the imagination. I know they exist. Okay, I know they're defined by the POSIX people in some cases, and I don't even know if zlib is defined by POSIX, but I may as well look this up. I did download the POSIX standards. It's huge. It's like 3,000 pages long. You have to forgive me because I'm going to be a little bit slow here because I'm only going to have a limited amount of time to actually research a lot of this stuff in the kind of depth that you call academic. You know what I mean? And I may just skip that because this is going to take a while. Yeah. So, but I will note this. Okay, so I'm not going to go through the exercise of this, but I know this is the case. There is a zlib.h header. And you can ignore that config.header thing for now. I know that one of my packages didn't compile because of a problem with the zlib header, and I can't say with any certainty at this point because there's only so many things I can do. But those three lines right there are missing, that are highlighted, are missing from our zlib header. But the author is the same. There's no other demarcations on this to indicate that it had been altered after April 28th, 2013. Ours has the exact same date. That happens to be at line 1350 to 52. Now, I don't know what that means. I don't know if that is the reason why it may or may not be the reason why for one of my packages is not coming out. But I am about ready to say that's probably a representative sample. And I really probably ought to actually look at the POSIX book. There it is, actually. It's huge. This is the latest standard from 2008. Now they have a whole chapter on, I think it's around page 200 if I remember right. Or maybe not. I have to, actually I'm not going to be able to search. I'm going to search here. No. So I've got to get out of this thing. Open up. But I'm just going to keep going. I'm pretty, I thought it was like, I'm going to just look up headers here because I know. How about this? Now I don't know exactly how these 400, what is it? Okay, so there's, these basically say, you know, this is what you should have on your headers. Headers are basically standard libraries that all the C programmers should be able to rely on. I don't see a zlib header. Stop. Okay, so I don't think there's actually a zlib header, so I can't claim that, why have we altered our POSIX header, because that's not the case. But at least I don't think it is, unless it comes up here. I doubt it. But I'm just wondering why it's different, and why there wasn't any indication that it was made different. And I wonder whether if I were to change my header, if I was able to, because it's read-only, if it would make a difference when I try to compile the package. Now I don't know if I path that locally. I'll try pathing it locally and see what happens. Maybe, if I get around to it. There's so many loose ends like this. It's ridiculous. But that's what happened. Okay, but then I tried to get the idea that there was something going on with the headers. Not all the errors explicitly say it's because of a header, but I recalled a few times where actually I had to, at one time I had to take the time header and move it into the source branch for something I was compiling. I have it on camera. I don't know, remember what it was. And I remember I had to change 2 lines on the zlib header, or the time header, and I had to path it locally so it would look at the time.h file that was in the source directory rather than in the common C library. It's normally in user include, but not in our case. We've refused to have a user directory. You know, there's no company stopping us from doing that, basically. But we've, you know, as a community, I guess we've still chose to do that, or maybe not. Maybe it's just one person's choice. You know, no one else can do anything about it. I don't know, but after I made those changes, I removed a few things that I didn't know what they meant. It compiled, you know. Okay, so how do these header things work? In source code, a lot of the time, you're going to see a file that has, this thing's still looking, so it's not going to find it. I'm just going to go to my Pkgsrc directory here, and I'm going to just go into one that I know I've already have extracted, and I know there's some source code on there. Here in the util directory, and these have headers with references to them. This is Linux. Okay, so this is saying to include a file called config.h. It's got brackets around it. Now, what does that mean? What that means is that it's called a relative reference, and I'll explain what that means. So, in this Linux installation, whoever had created the GCC package told GCC when it was set up that the header file should be in the user local directory. You don't have to choose the user local directory, but a lot of people end up choosing the user local directory. So if I were to look in the user local directory on this Linux system, I should expect to see a config.h file there, or I should expect that this might probably have some problem. It will probably not compile. This cert.c file. Basically, in general, I'll just go over to the user include directory, not local include. Now there should be a, I can't remember the name of that. File was, once again, config.h. Okay, now this if-def and indef, it says if it's, you know, if you're using DNS certificates in your Windows 32, include the windows.h, you know, there's not going to be one here. All right, and so let's go look. Is there a config.h header here? No, there isn't. That's rather interesting. Now you'll notice that sometimes in Linux you have to actually install what are called devel packages, and what happens when you install the devel packages, you get some headers. So it's probably not the best example, but a good example is standard input output, which is usually in most C files, and it's there. So let's look at that so we can actually draw the connection here. There's also a string there, but standard input output, most people would bet that it's going to be in there. No, not on this one. Is there a string? There is a string header. Okay, this was written by the Free Software Foundation. So, in this case, if I go and I try to compile this cert.c file that I have open twice, it's not going to work until such time as I get, at least for the purposes of the compiler, it pathed. Okay. Now, it could be that the reason why some of these headers are missing in Haiku is because there are some developer packages that provide the sys macros header or the statfs header. I just don't know what packages those are. Or the dirent header, right? But this is looking, okay, let's look in the system header here in Linux. Is there a sys macros? Yes, there is, right there. So that's the sys macros header. It's in, user include in this case. So this AFIO would have no trouble compiling here because it's able to find that header. So you get the idea. You're able to draw, and in these headers, they define function calls. And these are the kind of function calls that are written for a lot of people, not just one package. This code is reused in a lot of different places, so people don't have to rewrite code that someone else has already written. These are pretty much dependencies for being able to compile packages. Okay, let's take a look at Haiku. Now, if you notice, the only, in fact, I'm going to run a command here. I'm going to show where Linux wants, how to figure out where your system wants to find those headers. I think I might actually have to run it against some dummy program. So I'm going to go into my Pkgsrc directory. Into security and into GNU PG, into the work directory, into the GNU PG directory. And probably into the source directory if it's there. Scripts, okay, whatever. Scripts, do I have anything? No, I don't. Go back. ls, what do we have? E. Let's just go to the bzlib. Or the utils directory, how about that? There's a couple C files, so I'll just do gcc minus v, let's see, strg.c. Okay, now what it does is it spits out a bunch of information of what it's trying to do when it compiles. I mean, v means verbose. But basically, underneath these two include signs is where the includes are. So basically, if you have, it's going back to that, yeah, okay, let's look at this one that we just tried to compile. Okay, so it's actually missing that config header as far as I could tell. Unless the config header is in, okay, the config header should be in one of two places, either user local include or user include. So it might be in user local include. Let's go up there. Oh, it's empty. So that header is not there. Now sometimes headers are added and they're not needed. Sometimes they're missing too. But basically, in this case, really, since the user include directory is empty, and these two are pretty much, let's see. Let's look at this thing right here. There might be some headers in there that I'm ignoring. Maybe the config headers in that thing. Not much. And then, in fact, this looks like more like kernel code, right? So, basically, Linux has one directory as to where all these headers should be located, and that's user local, at least on my system. There's a possibility it could be in user include. There's a possibility it could be user local include, but there's no guarantee that it will. Okay, but it's ready for that. All right, let's go look at Haiku. Now I ran the same command in Haiku, and I'm going to go over what the B includes are first before I get into anything too heavy. But basically, take a look at this. There's a variable called B includes. It is pretty much almost the same thing as the GCC path, but these are the GCC search paths down here, and you can see up here at the top for POSIX purposes, we're not talking about BEOS purposes, which may be even more difficult to deal with, is that there are actually 4 directories here that are listed, 5 directories here that are listed. Boot system developed headers, and then the POSIX, the GLIBC, the GNU, and the BSD under that the compiler will search for all 5 of those in any case in which it has a header file enclosed in brackets, like that config file that we looked at right here. So where Linux has 1 folder, Haiku right now apparently has 5 folders. And what my concern is, or I'm wondering if maybe there could be some files in all 5, of the same name, but of different content in all 5 of the folders, and then the compiler doesn't know what to do. Which one does it pick? I've already kind of alluded to this before, so let's go into Haiku and look. So when I was looking this over, what I found was that in the system directory here, there's the there's the headers directory. They just call it headers. It's okay to call it header. It's not going to hurt anything to call it headers. But here in the POSIX directory and the BSD directory, in the root directory, there actually are duplicates. So we have a time.h, which I remember having to copy down, error number.h, standard input output, standard library, and string.h. All those are all duplicated, so I'm going to put them side by side so you can see that. When I have open, I have the BSD open, so I'm going to go to POSIX. The compiler isn't going to just know. Okay, so let's go here. Where's error number? Error number. Time. Time. Standard input output. Standard input output. Standard library, string, string. Now I don't know what that means. And then in the subdirectory called sys, there were 3. There is the wait, cdefs, and the param files that are duplicated. cdefs. Param, and down here should be wait at the bottom. There's wait. I haven't looked at the other 2. There's netinet. No duplications there. ARPA, and there's no duplication to ARPA. In fact, the combination of the contents of these 2 folders constitutes what's in all the files that are in the Linux folder. And then if there's any of the same named folder, okay, so now would this show up? These headers that are in the ARPA directory would show up as something like this. Okay, so if there are, and that's relative, right? This right here is basically ARPA is in the root directory, and this is in the ARPA directory. Kind of works. I don't know if it's really backwards what you're used to, but so if there also is an ARPA directory in, but there isn't. But if there was another ARPA directory here under headers, that'd be another chance that there would be duplications of the same. The programs rely on the definitions supplied by the headers. The compiler is looking in two directories and I think isn't going to know what to do, because you look around, there are no other operating system does this where they duplicate headers. So that, anything that's in the BSD directory here, it's as if it were in the front here. It's their equivalent for the purposes of the compiler. Same as everything here in the POSIX directory. And I haven't compared the contents of the POSIX directory to that. There may be some duplicates. I don't know. So I imagine that some of these, because we have the same compiler, a lot of the headers are POSIX headers, so they should be the same. Same source code, but in this system, it seems like we're getting a lot more than I would expect by reading Martin Brown's book there of undefined references. And that may be why. I don't know. I mean, I could be wrong. There could be some strings or some, way that, because also I think there might be either a time or a times or a types even in the root here that's duplicate with the time. So this time header here is also duplicated. No, not in the sys directory. It's got to be POSIX. In fact, I have to go to the root. Sorry. No, actually there isn't. Okay, but you can see there something could happen. And so I found those, but it doesn't mean it's true. But it could be, and it looks like it probably is. So let's look back. When I look back at my percentages here, I'm noticing a lot of undefined references. In some case, it really, if you dig deep enough, you might make it back to a header file, or you might not. Or it could be that just those functions just haven't been defined in the headers that we've made. I don't know who's made these headers. Let's see. This was made by Jürgen Pfeiffer. This is just basically free software found. That's GNU software, by the way. Right, so the entire OS is not BSD based. Hate to say that. Here's the OS that's specific to B. BSD, who made this? FreeBSD.org. There are a few in here that have been made by our guys, but not in all cases. And so, but here if we got a standard input-output that's usually slapped onto most every C code, just as good practice. And the beginning books to say, just put the standard input-output there anyway. This one was written by Haiku. I don't know what this code means. I don't know if it means go to the other one or not. Go to the POSIX one. There should be a standard input from POSIX. Okay, that was copywritten by Haiku. It's the POSIX standards are defined in that book. The concepts of those headers I thought were defined by that. What's in that book? Anyway, and then there's a standard input-output header in the base here. No, there isn't. So basically, I'm seeing duplications between the BSD and the POSIX directory with different content, different file sizes, and I think that's causing some problems. And I know one of them happens to be the time header. And the common problem that I'm having right now with Python is that it can't import the time module. Now, do I know it's because it's not being able to call the time header? Not really, but I did look into it for a little bit there. Now, there's something else I'll just go into quickly that it's more or less trivia, but it kind of explains why B Incorporated did what it did when it first started out, and it makes sense, and we're just kind of emulating it, but what we're doing I don't think makes sense. So let's get into it. So here it's got, these are the B includes for BOS. And just to back up here, this is a page from Martin Brown's books from page 214. When BEOS first came out, they didn't use the GNU-C compiler. Martin Brown writes in his book that GCC had just recently been ported, and he alludes to the fact that, in fact, you can see the command nwcc there, where I got the boot local circled. That's the MetroWorks compiler, CodeWarrior. Okay. In this situation, he alludes here, says, the MetroWorks compiler is more strict about which file it includes where, and so the I option is not always sufficient. Now, what I think he means there is that you have to fully path the header. You can't just, you see how these are fully pathed? One would think that with the way these relatives headers work, that that headers directory up there could be the root, and at the most, the headers for B programs would have a B add-ons. It would be like this. And standard input output header, right? Or something. Now, I noticed that B Inc. was very careful, though, not to name any of their headers with any of the names that are used by the common headers that are out there. They also had 3 other directories in this thing called the B includes, and what the B includes was the same thing as the includes that I got out of the gcc-v command, as far as I know. So this is my belief, but you know, if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong, but I don't, you know, so far I don't think so. And the reason why they pathed each one of these fully is because the MetroWorks compiler required that. Whereas the GCC compiler can handle just having a B or a CPP or a B add-ons in you know, these greater than, less than signs over here. So we've copied that, but in our stuff, we still have a B includes. I don't know why we do. Maybe someone could explain that to me, but I don't think it makes a difference to change the B includes variable. I was still saying, in general, we have configured GCC to allow, if there are duplicate names in any of the 5 files up there, or any of the files that, you know, I'm just talking about POSIX now, but of course for any of those down below, I'm talking about the headers POSIX, headers glibc, headers GNU, and headers BSD. those are all chances for us to end up creating duplicated headers by which when the compiler tries to compile it, it won't know what to do. At least that's my opinion of it. I'm surprised that now the glibc folder and the GNU folder are very sparsely populated, and let's take a look at those. Just a couple headers, print H, I'm not sure. And the GNU only has one header for this X header. Okay, so I think that's part of the problem, and I think we would have a much higher success rate if we got rid of those duplications. And maybe people are having issues right now compiling things where they didn't have them before because maybe that was added recently. I don't know. The date right now, it's August 23rd, 2014. I'm using a nightly from about a month ago. Okay. Now let's get to Python. Now, my leading theory right now is that basically a combination of things are causing problems with Python, not allowing it to compile. So, in general, when you try to compile Python natively, like Python 34, this is what I've seen. Okay, I'm going to say what I've seen. I've seen a majority of the PYO and PYC files that are expected to compile don't come out. In fact, I think I did a recent video of how to get Python to actually to work somewhat in Haiku, and the conclusion that it's somewhat. The good news about that is that the PYOs and PYCs, those are platform independent, so you could make those in Linux. So the way I approach Python 34, the most success that I've had so far with it, and I haven't had complete success yet, was even after patching it for all the patches that are Haiku ports, even after weeding out all the user local hard-coded paths. And there's a lot of documentation within Python where they explicitly say that Python wants to be installed to user local directory. It needs to know where to go the first time. And the second issue is that we have actually proactively decided not to allow our own users to create a user local directory. And we've made the file system read-only in certain parts, so you actually can't do that. I think that needs to be changed. So far, we're going in the list. We have possible duplicate headers, a missing user local directory. It isn't worth anybody's time to grep out for 2 to 4 hours, depending on their skill level with scripting, user local paths when the code's open source. And it still doesn't result in the success, even if you do that. You're still going to have issues. Some of the C code won't compile, and Python will just keep going. It won't stop if there's an error with one of the C codes. There's thousands of them. So I'm getting about, at least in Python 34, the important one that's stopping me from going forward is that the time header, the time module, won't compile. Some of Python's actually written in C code. So I attempted a compile of that, and I followed the evidence as far as I can go. And it seemed to have led me to the error said startdyn.o had some errors in it. This is the startdyn.c, the uncompiled version of it that I got from the GitHub, because it's not something to do with the new OS. In the beginning, I'd run GCC and try to compile the time module. It would say it was missing a bunch of Python headers. The Python headers are now let's go back here. Now in Linux, if I were to download Python and attempted to compile it, I have no problem. The Python install script would have no problem placing everything it wanted to place in the user local directory at that point. And then when Python tries to build, of course, it relies on the fact that it believes it's going to go to the user local directory. I don't know why it doesn't rely on the fact that it should probably just stay in its own source directory, but it doesn't. It wants to go to the user local directory, so that's the way it is. Python's huge. There are thousands of files in there. It'd be a lot for us to expect the Python project to change their practices for us. I know Python compiles in Windows, but there is, when it tries to compile in Windows, it creates another directory that it knows it wants to go to. So, but there are if-then conditional statements, I believe, just throughout. Python is just as much of a Windows program as a Linux program, as far as I can tell. Maybe more of a Windows program than as a Linux program. And there are conditionals all through those shell scripts, to go where it should go when it's trying to compile in Linux. But there aren't any conditionals all over the place for Haiku. And it'd be a lot easier for us to not insist that, because what ends up happening is we end up having to make changes to the code that I know the maintainer is just not going to accept. There's no if-then statement in the shebang. So it's just a shebang. And I bet you maybe in Windows it'll create a user local directory on C, So it just appends the C to it. Big deal. I'm not sure about that, but that seems the most logical thing. So finally, I worked my way. I copied all the Python headers, and I guess if you want to go find out where the Python headers are, they are here. Python, there it is, Python 2.6. But see, when Python installs, it needs to actually read some headers. Like these errors are saying, oh, where's the python.h header? I expect it to be right here, but it's not there. So I had to end up copying in all the headers, and there is an include directory. There is an include directory, and this is a standalone compilation. So the Python scripts actually refer to the include directory that's in the base of the source, actually. In some cases, but not all of them. You can imagine there's so many modules for the maintainer to manage, So finally, after I copied in all the header files from that local directory because I'm doing a GCC just to see what happens, because when you do a full compile, everything just scrolls on by so quick you can't even see it. Eventually I got to the point where all the headers were found, but now it's saying there was something going on with the start function in the object file that I can't change and I couldn't write to. I couldn't recompile if I wanted to, because it's read-only. And I can't even, if I wanted to, I can't even add another partition. I tried adding a second partition from VirtualBox to see if I could somehow use another file system and get a user directory. No, can't do it. It won't even read the second Haiku partition. It won't even read an NTFS part. You try to install it, it won't install the NTFS. So I'm stuck with this, whatever this error seems to be, right? It does seem to point to an object. No, that's old. That was finally resolved. So let's look this. Let's see. It's a start function, right? Right here. There's something going on with this code as it relates to the time module in Python 3.4 that doesn't allow the time module to compile. In Pkgsrc, there's so many of these C codes, they didn't bother actually making a complete list of all the C code that should compile. So you can't, even in Pkgsrc, you can't even tell when some of them fail. Some of them compile, some of them don't. And on this one, it happens to be that the time module doesn't. and specifically it's called timemodule.c, and it ends up having an error related to whatever this thing is that I can't change. Now, if I knew what to change about the time module code, and there is a patch over there at Haiku ports, but unfortunately it doesn't resolve the error. It's still there, at least for Python 34. I've tried 2.6, 2.7, 3.3, and 3.4, and all 4 versions that are offered by Pkgsrc, none of them compile completely right. All of them we're going to require for the PYOs and PYCs to be built in Linux, and that I believe is related to the fact that we've chosen not to have hard links in our file system. I don't know if it's simply that we can just choose to have hard links in it based on the fact that the file system is a database, but I'm not so thrilled about the fact that the file system is a database. I would rather have hard links, because not only some of the errors on the archivers, there's about 4 or 5 packages that either, let's say 2 or 3, that either in the outside make file or the inside make file, when it tries to install, wants to make hard links. So I've had to go and hand edit those things, which is, work I probably shouldn't have to do. Which is more, so the more difficult we make it for ourselves. So I have a feeling that these header directories were made to provide some compatibility. Okay. Now I'm going to get into some other things that I've just noticed that I don't really have too much direct evidence on. But first, this is actually a list of all the PYOs and PYCs that would not build in Haiku, but would build in Linux. And I believe I have the strong belief that these, now there is a setting in the configure, one of the configure files for Python where you can opt to not have it use hard links, supposedly, but these still don't build. So I don't know but I did see an error in the kernel log saying that the operation wasn't allowed, and it would usually come up around the time the PYOs and PYCs were building. All I know is at the end of the day I had to copy them over. It could be something else. It could be the linker. And there's something else I noticed. Yeah, I'm going to mention this too because I forgot. So at the end of the day, after I got all the headers, I put all the headers in the same directory as the time module. I ended up with this stuff that seems to go back to this start_dyn library file. When I ran GCC and I used if I use GCC space minus shared and then timemodule.o, I wouldn't get any of those errors. Problem is, I don't know if this system wants to build shared libraries or not and what they're supposed to look like. It's beyond my knowledge at this point, unfortunately. So I can't draw any conclusions by that. But maybe from this evidence, someone could look and figure out what's going on, and maybe they could find something major. This is what I'm hoping to do. But I want to actually look at actual errors and try to deal with them. Something else that I noticed is just in a general sense, it seemed to me that it was easier to compile packages in general in GCC 4 rather than GCC 2. And I know that the GCC 2 is being maintained and has, back patches from, so it says on one of the web pages that it's being patched for the patches that are things that come into GCC 4. But it seemed to me in general that it was just, I would have less of these missing system call errors when I compile with GCC 4. In some cases, I'd have to compile GCC 2 and it would work, or it didn't with GCC 4. That's after using the setarch function to change from one to the other. But I noticed that even when I set the arch in the hybrid, there were times where things would compile here and would not compile in the hybrid. There are things that will compile in the hybrid that will not compile here. Right now, SDL, for some reason, compiled without any dependencies in GC2, and here it wants a bunch of stuff, and I still don't have it in there yet. Or I had the SDL sound, I believe, package compiled on my laptop that has the hybrid on it, and this one I've just gone with GC4, it won't compile. But for the most part, it's the opposite. Where I've got something compiled on here, or I'm getting errors on GC2, but not that many. Mostly they're equivalent. For a while there, I was going to say they're roughly equivalent. Okay, so the overall outlook that I have right now is I'm probably at a stage where it's going to be very, very difficult for me to get anywhere. Right now I have a broken version of Python, at least in package source. The only good news about Python as it relates to X11 libraries is that I've come to find out is that you can actually compile some of these X11 libraries against Python 2.6 and then use them in an environment that's running Python 34. Even though Pkgsrc wants Python 2.7, which made it a little bit difficult there for a while. For the most part, I have some hacks or settings in my make.conf file that for the most part, I don't have to worry about the math library at all. It'll even add, in some cases, will add the network library for me and will get rid of L-socket errors and take care of pthreads in most cases. One other big issue that I have with Pkgsrc is that once you start trying to compile X11 libraries, you need something called pthreads stubs or something like that. And NetBSD only has a package for NetBSD. They don't have it for NetBSD less than 2. That's probably something that a lot of the more modern OSs don't need for reasons that are unclear to me. But they haven't really even bothered to build a pthread stubs package for, and I don't even know what it does. And I tried to build it in Haiku Porter, and all it did was make a package config text file. It didn't really build a library. And I noticed there was some C code in the source code, so I'm not sure. But that was good enough to get it to allow it to compile libxcb, which was a real pain. What I had to do with that is because I have both a broken Python and package config it seems to want this package I can't get installed in package source. I went into Haiku Porter, and the latest version the Haiku Porter has set up automatically is 1.6. So I ended up changing the recipe to make it 1.7. Ran it, stopped it before the configure was done, manually applied the patches, because I don't know how to apply patches with whatever command. Maybe it's the patch command, who knows if there is a patch command. And it worked, so I was able to build 1.11, and then once I had that build, I copied it into package source and then kept tweaking the make file to get it to have the files go where package source wanted them. And I finally massaged it, and I finally got a build of the thing. But I had to remember to keep having it point to a certain part of the hike. I don't even remember. I'll probably have another video about it. It was very, very difficult. Between Python not building and then library X11 is just impossible because there's no way to put in X11 directory as far as I know on this. I'll have to look to see where it is, if there is one in the system directory. I don't think there is. I mean, Pkgsrc will give you one of those, but then so it can overcome that. But then what Pkgsrc can't do is the pthread stubs package. So it's catch-22 that I'm in right now, and I'm probably gonna have to do something like I did before. Use Haiku Porter and make this Frankenstein makefile that'll point in some ways over to Haiku and point in some ways to Pkgsrc, and then have to go in and manually edit the package config files. But that's how difficult it is, because some of the basic things aren't building, and the basic things aren't building because what I believe, we're not allowed to have a user directory. Literally, you cannot make one. It's read-only. Developers have said no to that option. They wouldn't give us a symlink. Duplicate headers, perhaps. Lack of hard links, perhaps. And between all those things, it makes it very difficult, so it's a very tedious process. Pkgsrc doesn't run this as smoothly as it did in NetBSD for me. And it's getting to the point where it's not worth my time. The only reason for me to do this now is not because it's fun, but because I'm learning from it. But once I've learned from it, I would never do this again, because it's just too much work for nothing. I may learn how to make some patches, but there are a lot of things I've done that probably don't really qualify as patches that are acceptable, like copying the time.h header into some source code and editing it, and locally pathing some of the source code, to make it build. I mean, I'll try everything to get this thing to build. But it seems like after I break through one thing that's been really formidable, I'll find something else that's just as bad or worse, and I never really get. Meanwhile, over at Haiku, they have a pretty good selection of stuff, but I think all those things were built before this recent release of the package manager, and I'm not sure why the directory structure of the system was changed because there's a package manager. I mean, I do like at the end of the day that there is a feature. If you drop a Haiku package into this config packages folder, it'll end up being installed. And there were some times I had to do that, so a dependency of Pkgsrc would be fulfilled. So when the system is very difficult to work with, Pkgsrc, to a certain degree, can get in your way, but in other degrees, it helps you find out things that no one else would even try. I mean, I got 300 fonts or something. They're just, or 229 fonts out of 332 there. There's still some more things for me to try. And when I compare what I have installed on my system to what's on Haiku ports, I mean, Haiku ports does give me some hope. I'm trying to go as far as I can. I'm still trying to explore. So I know that there's some things that I haven't really tried yet. I have a list of packages that are available at Haiku ports. Some of the packages I might have installed, I just don't know if the names really match up, but the ones that are yellow or the ones that are white, I haven't checked to see if I have those already. The ones that are scratched out are ones that I have. Of course, the Haiku packages, I'm not going to have any of them because those aren't really in Pkgsrc. Now, the good news about Pkgsrc is that maybe if I learn how to patch some stuff, I may be able to get patches into Haiku Porter to get it up to more recent versions. But the version choices may be the way they are because other things are of a certain age and they're not movable. Like Python 2.6, the rest of the builds are marked as broken, and they are broken, at least in Haiku. The strategy that I would use would be to build it both in Linux and Haiku and get the PYOs and PYCs moved over from Linux to Haiku, and then try to work out as many of these. There's probably I couldn't even tell you how much C code in Python isn't being built, but it's a lot. It won't build here, and I don't know if it's just because of that one thing that I found or a bunch of stuff. PYOs and PYCs I don't think are building. I'm not sure. It could be the link. It could be a number of things. I still don't know. I just have ancillary evidence. I think it's the hard links. I know I did try a compile, and I had gone through and I had gotten rid of every reference to user, even in the text files, and I still had the same results, actually. There's only about 5 or 6, besides all these C files that I'm talking about. There's the Python binary, there's about 3 libraries, and there's a PyConfig and a couple other things that'll build no matter if you have the user local in there or not. And so when I did my presentation, I said just forget about the user local. Just build it in Linux, bring over the PYOs and PYCs from there. So, I mean, it's like a 4-hour exercise and it's going to happen on every single version unless we get some good script in there or Perl script that's going to go in and grep out all the user locals. And there's some things in Python where it's like, if you start the process, you can change the contents of a py file, and then as the build goes, it'll rechange it back, the user local stuff. It's really, really, unless you have a user directory or local directory to write to, it's a real pain in the ass to try to compile. So I just don't recommend anyone worrying about anything building but those 4 or 5 and as many C files as they can. But there's probably so many patches, an endless number of patches for all those C files for various maybe headers that aren't being hit or missing definitions, or it's almost unfathomable at this stage. It would really take a whole team of people that were dedicated to getting Python working in Haiku. I mean, a team, I think, because the patches are going to be numerous. We'd almost have to have a fork, I would say. And looking at some of the comments that were made when discussions were made about accepting our patches, they just blew us off as if we were minor and going nowhere. They weren't even worth considering. And same kind of thing happened with OpenSSL, and I haven't even looked at the other ones. It's really disheartening. Because it's just too much work. And Python is a very, very basic building block to so many things. You need Python to build any of the X11 based packages, which are graphical user interface packages. Those packages people want to use. If you can't build Python, it's not going to go anywhere. Now, luckily, a lot of these things will build with 2.6 for a while, but eventually they're going to say we're going to need a newer version of Python. We're going to get snookered out. And the newer versions of Python, as evidenced by the lack of its ability and being marked as broken recipes at Haiku Porter, I really do believe something's got to change on the inner engine of Haiku to get that to build. And whether I'm right about the user directory, whether I'm right about the hard links, whether I'm right about this, the headers, or this, what is it? Start_dync file, I don't know. But this basically is a summary of my report. I'm going to try to keep building. I'm going to try to work through LiveX11. It's just, God, it's just... With the X11 library that I have right now, before I get into that, one last comment on the B includes. So the B includes were there, just to hammer this home again, as a way to make sure that all the headers were pathed. Because at one point, the Metro compiler, I believe, I'm not, later on it seemed like it was able to handle relative paths, but at one point I don't think it was. And that's the reason why B Incorporated, when they made the operating system, made so many. I mean, right here they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 files in which there's a possibility of a header conflict, is what I'll call it. In our situation, we have 5 plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 26, maybe 28 directories that it could end up that if we have a file of the same name, that makes it complicated. Because, you can't just, you have to look at one directory and see, okay, is everything that's in this directory, is there any of the files that are named this name in this directory over in this directory? And then you look at the other directory and say, are there any of the files that are in this directory of the same name of the ones that are in the, you got to go both ways, or else you might miss something. I know that just because, that's pretty much true. You have to see it to understand it, work with it and understand it, but that's pretty much true. Accountants will check for completeness. Is everything on the list there? Everything that is everything that should be on this list there? And then they'll also check to see if everything on the list actually exists. Like, for example, so this with the B includes, where do I put that thing? There's one B include, but I don't even think this does anything. This B include. I don't know. But the CPP directory doesn't even exist. There are some differences. I think the devel directory there doesn't exist down here with the GCC paths, but besides that, they're roughly equivalent. So it's a tough grind for each and every package, it seems like, on this thing. And it just isn't worth it or fun anymore. And I don't know what happened. So the people that have been building these packages over at Haiku have really worked hard to get you the Commodore 64 emulator Vice or DOS-EMU or Lynx. I also noticed I tried Lynx. It is in Haiku Porter. I tried it and I had the same result. It still has that networking issue. Haiku Porter is a good thing provided we get to the point where we have packages that are recent and all the packages build, because, and just because some of the packages don't build, it's not necessarily a mark against Haiku Porter. It's more like what's going on underneath the hood. Same source code, same compiler, and I would think we should have the same headers. We have GNU headers in our system right now. So, if we're missing headers, just put them in there. I don't see why we wouldn't do that. But I guess, some of these packages actually just include headers, and that's it. I don't know. But I'm about ready to give up. Maybe, I don't know if I'm going to get past I'll probably get past 1,000. If I pick the right category to do just a blind compile in, I may get further, but right now it just seems like everything I try to build, I'm getting to the stage where I'm running out of Unix apps and I'm getting to X11 apps, and they all want live X11, and I've got this horrible catch-22. It's even going to be more difficult. So, and I think actually in Haiku Porter, now that I remember, The X11, I think it was marked as broken and was asking for really tedious things that were just fucking annoying. The package description doesn't say what it provides. The package description doesn't have a license. I don't give a shit. I'm trying to compile things. I don't want to be doing tedious stuff. So the recipe in there, some of the reasons why some of these recipes are marked as broken are just stupid. Like, the license for the package that, never even comes up when you try to compile it. Or they're trying to get people to package these things correctly, I gather, but it makes it just so tedious and unfun, too much work. You just go find something else. Just build it on your own. Especially when it doesn't really chain all that well. All right, so that's pretty much it. And even some of the packages, I'll say this, even some of the packages that I've ported or just compiled, there's this program that will analyze a word to see if an anagram can be generated. It's called An, and it wants a user local directory. So, I didn't know to look, it compiled, but I didn't know to look into it to find, and there's going to be parts. There's going to be a lot of these applications that have that kind of thing in it. And that's just a lot to ask of the developer community when we've managed to make a writable temporary directory. I don't see why we wouldn't do the same for user local and make things, give our developers a chance to actually, so the guys over at Haiku are heroes. I mean, they must have worked really hard to get what they have, and to see it all just turned into dust because we don't want to have a common directory anymore is just, it blows my mind. So and it seems like unfortunately the community is getting restless and wants to actually be able to use this OS, and it seems to be going at a very slow pace. And I very much appreciate everything. It's a beautiful OS. I appreciate everything that's been done so far. But I think part of the reason why it's going at a snail's pace is because some of the choices that were made that a lot of people just don't have enough control over. It'd be a lot easier if, the leaders of the project would just allow us to have the things that we want instead of having us fork and redo everything. And no one really wants to fork. I don't think anybody really wants to fork. Everybody really is holding on and waiting and really wants Haiku Inc. to allow Haiku to go to the next level. Now, I know that some of these things are being done for compatibility, or at least they're trying. Whether adding hard links to the file system is going to break the old programs, I just don't know. But I happen to own Go Be Productive. Actually, I brought one of the booklets with me here today. Where did I put that? Oh, here it is. So this is the old book, right? I still have a CD image, and we did word processing and spreadsheets and images and things like that. But I think this is the last version that came out. I haven't tried to run it in Haiku, but this was released in 1999. So, the software is 15 years old. You can't buy it anywhere. You can download it, but as I said before, that's probably, unless you owned it before, it's legally questionable. Even if you did own it before, it's legal. I haven't read the license. I'm not going to. I don't see the commercial vendors arriving. And so, the most obvious move is to get these Linux apps to compile. And I really don't think It's going to ruin a BOS experience. The reason why we have this hybrid thing going on, I think it's part of our problems. On my other machine where I have the hybrid going, I have some of these apps compiled in 2 and some of them compiled in 4. They're not going to mix, right? This I'm strictly gone with 4. But I'd almost imagine that some of the patches that are being, sent to Haiku ports, or I know for DOS-CMU, one of the patches only works in GCC 4, but not 2. Probably a good number of errors that we're having, or it's odd, we've got a system where the patch only works for GCC 2, or the patch only works for GCC 4, and we haven't sorted out the one for GCC 4. It's so broken, and trying to do all this compatibility stuff ends up making things more complicated. We have 5 times the complication just for headers, 2 times the complication for compilers, and you add all the complexity together. We have additional complication because we don't have things other operating systems have as far as just directories. A hidden user directory is not going to kill anybody, I'll tell you that. Now, I don't know if Go Be Productive relies on the database nature of the B file system, and if that has to be broken to create hard links, how many people are actually using Go Be Productive? And it's not like they're not going to be able to use it anymore. It would probably just have to be in a different environment. I don't know. We could try to hang on to some compatibility forever, but it causes bitrot at the other end. So we have some users that have been around for a long time. Yeah, they could use Go Be Productive, but they can't use the browser they want. There's absolutely... It's a pipe dream to think that at this point that maybe Wine might compile and people can use the Office suite they want. If OpenOffice, we're even close to getting some, we might have KOffice. I've never even used that in Linux. It's like 4th, 5th choice. I don't even bother with it. So if we want to stay stuck and not go anywhere, that's what I don't think it's necessarily the kernel. We don't have enough apps to start complaining about hardware at this stage. Once we have enough apps, then we can start complaining about hardware. Then we can start thinking about whether it was a good choice to go with the Haiku kernel or not. But quite frankly, if it's true that we'll be able to port over all the FreeBSD drivers, that's good. But if it costs us a lot of the apps not compiling because we have a BSD header path, then maybe it ain't so great. So, I don't know. We've tried. The community has tried to get the leadership to change its mind, and they've flat out said no, and they've flat out just been kind of defensive, quite frankly. I mean, almost to the point of being rude. I'm not to say I'm an angel either, but if this OS is going to go anywhere, I quite frankly don't think it's going to happen with the group that we're with, and it's unfortunate. The game has changed, and one point that I tried to make on the mailing list was that the people that made this part up to now they're like the Michael Jordans and Wilt Chamberlains of basketball, of Haiku, of operating systems. They've made this thing, but now we're on the baseball field, and when you try to port apps, you need certain things to be in place, and things need to be a certain way that's different. The atmosphere seems to be a little bit too, stressful, or it's just there's not a lot of room. No one really. There's not a lot of people seem to have much of a sense of humor. If you talk about the wrong thing, they don't they'll find a way to say you're trolling. It's just really, really odd. Um, they're really defensive about the decisions that they make, and they're not going to change it. And they don't, and it's unfortunate. It seems like IQ is in this walled castle up on the hill and I've read even some people that are in the leadership, they're saying that their developers are starting to go. Well, the reason why they're starting to go is because it's just too damn hard to get this thing working. I don't have enough experience to say that it's impossible. Certainly there are people that are better at porting apps than I am. But I have a good idea of how much work they would have to do. It has nothing to do with skill. It has everything to do with what they have to work with. And it's too much. All right, so that's pretty much almost my last thing. I may go on and do a couple things. I've discovered stuff, how to get it to work in Pkgsrc. But I may talk about how to create patches or recipes in Haiku Porter, because I really do want to honor that. It's a good system. I'm not trying to slam it. I think it's a good thing. It's pretty much the same thing as Pkgsrc. And maybe if I figure out how to roll more efficiently in Haiku Porter, I may continue. In fact, that's almost what I have in mind now, is to get out of Pkgsrc and just to work in Haiku Porter. But I'm going to have to figure out how to create these recipes and these patches and convert the ones that already exist over here at Pkgsrc and get it over there to Haiku Porter. And I don't know how to use Python. And I really don't think there's an option in Haiku Porter that allows for some of the cool things I'm able to do in Pkgsrc. It almost, to my mind, kind of begs. Pkgsrc is a good. The reason why I did it this way, and I guess this will be the last thing I'll say, is that Pkgsrc is a good way to explore and figure out what'll just compile. It's a good way to compile things that need a lot of hacks to LSocket, math library, pthreads, and the L network. You don't have to mess with that much. So there may be some things that there would actually be better handled in something that uses the Pkgsrc structure, and there'll be some things that'll be better handled using the Python structure. But in general, Haiku Porter is a good thing. It's just a bit too damn tedious, and I may end up not even using it because, yes, at the end of the day, we probably do want our recipes and our patches to be fully labeled up to the standard that we prescribed, but it takes a lot of time, and there are a lot of packages out there. It's kind of like trying to walk through the mud, but make sure your shoes don't get dirty on the way. I mean, you can do it, but you're probably not going to get to where you need to go in time, And that's kind of the way it is. I think things need to loosen up in general. The attitude needs to loosen up. It needs to be less of a pissing contest and more of a club of ideas and a menagerie. And, one reason to go in for me to do this thing with Pkgsrc was to try to find, maybe if I could find some answers. If people do things a different way, they're going to find things that wouldn't be found otherwise, because they just have a different perspective and they could see at a different angle than, but that doesn't seem like the atmosphere over there is really welcome. It's like a library on IRC, it really is. And I mean, if it incites people to ask me who I am just because I'm making announcements about what packages have compiled, it's just it's not a welcoming atmosphere, whether they try to be polite or not, and it's unfortunate. And I just think it's kind of like everything's just so tightly wound over. That was the word I was looking for. Everything has to be done just right and perfect to start with. There's no room to start a little bit, let someone else finish off this part, someone else add a little bit of polish and let it evolve into something that's polished. It seems like everything's got to be done perfect, or just don't do it at all and get out of here, kind of thing. Do it our way or get out of here. That eventually people are going to go. Something's going to happen that they're not going to stick around. We want it to be the other way, is what I think. My final thought is that I think that the Haiku team is a very good team. They're very skilled. They're kind of like the Lakers without Phil Jackson. Back to sports again, but as soon as Phil Jackson shows up, all of a sudden the Lakers are world champions. They'll win year in, year in out. But without Phil Jackson, they sure as shit think they're a good team, but they're not winning. And it's kind of what's happened to Haiku. Something needs to happen with the atmosphere. Some direction or guidance or something has to happen. I don't know what that is or how it would happen, but I really am hoping the best. I like all the developers, even though I wouldn't bother to criticize them if I didn't care. And I do care about this opera. I want to see it succeed. I spent a lot of time trying to get these things ported, and I am very thankful for people at Haiku for the efforts they've put in, and I am really thankful for Akika Obato. I'm going to get these names. I'm very thankful for Martin Brown. I was able to pick up some advice from him because I'm thankful to Jonathan Perkin, who has come up with some pretty neat kind of ways of getting things to compile by making changes just to the make file. Let's see. I'm gonna find that guy's name because I'm not gonna. I am appreciative to the original creator of Pkgsrc. I'm doing a horrible job. Obachi. Akiko Obachi, I believe. Very thankful for what he's done. Thankful for the creator of Haiku Porter, Jessica Hamilton. Thankful for the people that made Haiku. I'm thankful for a lot of things. So I want it to work out. It's kind of what it is, and the frustration that I have expressed is kind of like, why are you doing this, guys? Come on. Just turn it around. We can do this. Michael Phipps, appreciable to everybody that's been involved with that whole thing. And there's a really good there's a guy named, I don't know his, I know what his nick, he goes by the name Diger. He's been trying to do Pkgsrc, and he even put up his whole repository of scripts and things and local patches, and it's nothing against Diger. I don't have enough skill to actually use his local patches, and I really would have liked to. I'm probably gonna look at it again, see if maybe that'll make a difference. He's made packages available. He put a GitHub up there. A lot of people worth mentioning, and I don't even know if I can cover them all, but I wanted to mention them at least once. So that's the deal with Pkgsrc. I'm trying. I don't think I'm going to get that far, but I might have a breakthrough. This always happens. I didn't think I would get anywhere as far as I even got with Python, and I still think it's formidable. So that's the deal.